Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's explainer, where we're looking at something that literally affects every single one of us, every single day. We're talking about the wider economy, and specifically, its massive ripple effects on businesses. Now, I want you to picture the economy as this vast, totally unpredictable ocean. It's powerful, it's constantly shifting, and honestly, it rarely stays calm for very long. In this scenario, businesses, they're the ships just trying to navigate those waters. Sometimes a strong current pushes them right along, but other times they are desperately paddling just to stay afloat. So today we're going to break down exactly how these economic tides actually work and how governments step in to try and control them. Here is our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with the business cycle, then look at government objectives. After that, we'll unpack fiscal policy, monetary policy, and supply-side policies before finally wrapping up with how businesses adapt. All right, Section 1, the business cycle, or as we're calling it, the unpredictable ocean. Now, the fundamental reality here is that economic growth, it just doesn't happen in a straight, steady line. It ebbs, it flows, and it's honestly a bit of a roller coaster. It's fascinating how quickly a peak can turn into a valley. It usually starts with growth. This is when GDP is rising, unemployment is falling, and businesses are doing incredibly well because, well, people just have more money in their pockets to spend. But then we hit a boom. Too much spending happens, prices start skyrocketing, and suddenly businesses find their costs going way up, and finding skilled workers becomes really, really hard. And as you know, what goes up must come down. That brings us to a recession. Here, GDP actually shrinks because people are tightening their belts and spending less. Demand drops and business profits just plummet. If things don't turn around, we hit the absolute bottom, a slump. That's a long, serious recession with sky-high unemployment, falling prices, and unfortunately, a lot of businesses completely failing. Moving on to Section 2, Government Economic Objectives. Think of this as the captain's goals. If the economy is this unpredictable ocean, the government is the captain desperately trying to tame those wild waves. And they've basically got 4 major targets they're trying to hit. First up is low inflation. This means they're constantly battling rising prices to keep the cost of everyday goods stable, basically making sure your money actually keeps its value. Second, low unemployment. They want to make sure that as many people as possible who actually want to work can find a job. Third is economic growth. And fourth is keeping a healthy balance of payments. All that really means is keeping a careful balance between the stuff we sell abroad, our exports, and the stuff we buy from abroad, our imports. Just to really ground that third objective, economic growth, we need to define the ultimate national scorecard, and that is gross domestic product, or GDP. When you hear people talk about growing the economy, they are specifically talking about increasing GDP. It's the total value of all the goods and services a country produces in a single year. Simply put, if GDP is going up, the economy is growing. Which brings us to Section 3, fiscal policy, the classic tax and spend. So how exactly does the government captain the ship? Well, they pull some pretty major mechanical levers. The very first one is fiscal policy. This is exactly how the government uses taxes and public spending to try and influence the economy. It's their direct, hands-on financial intervention to change how much money is actually flowing through the system at any given moment. If they need to cool down an overheating, booming economy or jumpstart a slumping one, this is usually the very first tool they reach for. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a business owner for a second and look at the double-edged sword of these tax changes. When the government decides to raise income tax, the tax on what everyday people earn, consumers instantly have less disposable income. Less money left over means they buy less stuff and business sales take a hit. But on the flip side, if the government raises corporation tax, the tax on business profits, the business takes a direct hit. Higher rates mean they have way less cash left over to reinvest and actually grow their company. Either way you slice it, raising these taxes puts a massive squeeze on a business's ability to thrive. But it doesn't stop at just income and corporate profits. Governments also rely heavily on indirect taxes, like VAT. These are added directly to the price of items, literally making goods on the physical shelf more expensive. Suddenly, that new laptop or even your morning coffee just costs you more. Then you've got import tariffs and quotas. These are special taxes or strict physical limits placed specifically on goods coming in from other countries. The whole goal here, protect local businesses. By making foreign goods artificially more expensive or much harder to find, it basically forces buyers to go to local suppliers instead. Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds. Monetary policy, or the cost of money. Okay, if fiscal policy was the first lever, monetary policy is absolutely the second. And this one is all about the literal price tag attached to borrowing cash. It is super important to keep this separate from fiscal policy in your mind. Monetary policy is strictly about changing interest rates. And an interest rate?
That is simply the cost of borrowing money. By dialing that cost up or down, the government can drastically change how both businesses and consumers behave.
This brilliantly illustrates the step-by-step chain reaction that happens when the government actually pulls that interest rate lever. Say they want to cool things down. Step 1, interest rates rise. Boom. Step 2, almost immediately loan costs increase. That means businesses holding existing bank loans suddenly have to pay back way more in interest. Step 3, consumer demand absolutely drops. Why? Well, consumers are suddenly way less likely to take out a loan for big, expensive items like cars or houses. And finally, step 4, business profits fall. Operational costs are up because of the expensive loans, and sales are way down because of hesitant consumers. The bottom line takes a massive hit.
Next up, Section 5, Supply-Side Policies. Basically, upgrading the ship.
So far, we've mostly talked about tweaking demand, right? Taxing people so they spend less or making borrowing way more expensive. But this third set of policies is totally different. They don't just tweak spending. They aim to upgrade the entire economic engine itself. The big picture goal of supply-side economics is pretty straightforward, but incredibly ambitious. Make the whole economy more efficient and fundamentally more competitive on a global scale. It's all about building a better, faster, much stronger ship that can weather literally any economic ocean.
To actually achieve that kind of efficiency, governments use a few very specific tactics. First up is privatization. This is selling off government-run businesses to private owners. The logic is that the drive for profit inherently creates better efficiency. Next, we have improved training. This means investing in better education to upskill the entire national workforce because, let's face it, a highly skilled workforce produces way better goods and does it much faster. Finally, increased competition. This is achieved by rolling back government controls and red tape, encouraging more new businesses to start up and compete. It is literally the economic equivalent of taking the training wheels off and just letting the market race. Finally, Section 6, How Businesses Adapt. Bracing for impact. So, the crucial point here is bringing all these massive, high-level macro concepts right down to the micro level. When these policies hit the real world, businesses are forced to pivot, and that always requires some pretty dramatic trade-offs. For instance, if the government slaps on a higher income tax, consumer demand drops. The business response? They often have to lower their prices just to keep people buying. The potential problem? Their profit margins get absolutely squeezed. Next, if we see higher interest rates, businesses will often slash their investments and even sell off assets just to generate some cash. But the painful catch is, by halting their own expansion, they might easily lose vital market share to rivals who are brave enough to keep growing. And lastly, if higher import tariffs hit, businesses might be forced to switch to locally produced materials to dodge the new tax. The downside there? Those foreign materials might have actually been much higher quality, meaning the business's final product ultimately suffers. The takeaway: every single policy change requires a strategic and very often painful adaptation.
So we have covered the business cycle, the government's major objectives, and the distinct levers they pull to actually try and achieve them. I want to leave you with this provocative thought right from our summary checklist. If the business cycle suddenly shifted into a recession tomorrow, could you actively identify the difference between fiscal and monetary policy to help your own business survive the slump? Knowing whether you're facing a tax squeeze or an interest rate hike really is the difference between letting those waves sink you or expertly navigating your ship to much calmer waters. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and we will see you in the next explainer.